Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, everyone from around the world. My name is Olia Basala Avchinnikova, and I'm an Olympian and an education manager at the International Testing Agency. So welcome to the second webinar of the ITA series of the 2021. Big welcome to anyone joining for the first time. It's great to have such a large turnout and such a good interest in this important discussion. Feel free to chat with us to tell us where you're from, what sport you represent, what your role is. We have a very strong representation of combat sports today. So a big shout out to karate, Muay Thai, the wrestling community for showing up in big numbers. And of course, hello to all the other sports and athletes and those of you supporting your athletes around the world. So I will check the chat to see who is saying hello from where in just a second. But let me introduce our 12-part series first. Of course, this is a year-long series that are publicly available and designed to tackle key topics in anti-doping and to raise clean sport awareness. Each month, we will pick one topic, whether it's medical, science, therapeutic use exemptions, legal, whatever it is, and we'll discuss it with an expert or experts in the area and a high-performance athlete. So note that this session, of course, is being recorded as always. It will be available after for your viewing. We're streaming live on Facebook as well. But if you really want to ask questions, if you want to receive a copy of the slides, we encourage you to go over to Zoom rather than watching from Facebook. But that's, of course, an option for you and your preference. So we are thrilled to have an official presenting partner for this webinar program, and that is Informed Sport. Informed Sport is a global certification program designed to ensure that sport supplement products are not contaminated with prohibited substances. So we're really happy to have their support with these webinars, which means that we can continue to develop content and to have these meaningful discussions with you, the global sport community. Informed Sport has just launched their new website, which you should be able to see on your screen shortly. So if you're taking any supplements, make sure to verify them by going to sport.wetestYoutrust.com. So it's a new link here, and you can look up certified products by name, region, batch number, a great way to protect yourself and your health. So it's on your screen there if you want to take a look. Okay, so we won't do too much housekeeping this time. I can see all the hellos from around the world, from Botswana, from a lot of the Muay Thai community saying hello. Hello from Canada, good morning. The Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, Zambia, Karate, Fiji, World Karate Federation, Minnesota, the States, Singapore, Kenya, Africa Zone 6, the Rado here, Australia, England, UK, fencing. Hello to a fellow fencer, Venezuela. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. All right, so let's get right into it. We have named today's session, Be Prepared for Any Scenario of Doping Control. And we frequently receive questions about various aspects of this doping control, from how to fill out the form, to delays, partial sample, diluted sample. What do all these things really mean? And so today we will address all of these questions with our experts and our athlete. So now I would like to introduce them. You will see them joining us on video in just a second. I will introduce Jasmina first. Let's see if we can see Jasmina. Jasmina Glad-Treven is an international doping control officer and a trainer with over 16 years of experience. Jasmina has developed and delivered training programs to hundreds of DCOs around the world. She has worked as a testing coordinator at international federations, national anti-doping agencies, and private sample collection agencies. As a national level athlete in athletics, triathlon, swim run, she has also a deep understanding of anti-doping from the athlete's perspective. Hi, Jasmina.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited and I'm stunned by seeing all the participants coming in. Exciting.
Me too.
Hi, everybody.
Me too. We actually have, all of us are former athletes or current athletes. So very excited to introduce also to you Taya Petric. Taya has over 15 years of experience in anti-doping, 10 of these years in doping control particularly. Taya was a high-level gymnast competing in international events like the Mediterranean Games, World Cups, world and continental championships. And she later transitioned into competitive cheerleading, where she was European champion and second at World Championships. Taya worked at the International Federation of Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies, the world's largest humanitarian network, prior to taking some time to focus on her family. Hi, Taya.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here and see so many participants interested in this topic. It's great. Looking forward to it.
People are looking forward to hearing about doping control. So always a bit of a surprise to me, but grateful that you're all joining. So finally, I would like to introduce Miss Janice Lin, our athlete guest for today. Janice is a 3-time Muay Thai world champion. Maybe that's why the Muay Thai representation is strong today to see Janice, a certified holistic nutritionist and IFMA Athletes Commission chair. In her 12 plus years as a Muay Thai practitioner, it has allowed her to explore the health and fitness world through the lens of an elite athlete, student, biologist, holistic nutritionist, Muay Thai trainer, coach, gym manager, event coordinator, and of course, an Athletes Commission chair. With all these perspectives under her belt, Janice's goal is now to use her experiences to educate, build better role models, and to encourage the expression of the athlete voice. Welcome, Janice.
Sawadee-ka. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Olia and ITA, for all your hard work in educating our athletes. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And I love the bio. I love reading it out. So many roles there, all very key roles in the global sport network. Okay, so with the introductions done, we'll get right to the agenda. As you can see on the screen, it's a busy one for today. We had so many questions that we tried to compile into different categories, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more questions from you today. But if you look at the agenda, and we'll go in that order today, we will tackle the out of competition testing first. Very much aware that this topic alone is something that can take hours of discussion, and we will talk about out of comp testing in a separate session. But today we'll address some of the most popular and most common questions. We'll talk about waiting and delays in doping control, what the valid reasons are, what the valid reasons are not, etc. So we'll discuss that. Some questions that have come up around eating, drinking, receiving medical treatment, what is allowed, once again, what's not allowed, and what is at your discretion as an athlete. We'll also explain the procedures around partial and diluted samples, and these words may be strange to you right now, so hopefully we'll clarify those for you. And we'll also speak about the doping control form and some of the common questions there, especially around listing medications, consent, your signature, and so on. There are a few quick points also around blood sample collection that we'll cover, especially around the amount of blood drawn and the difference between urine and blood sample collection, questions that always come up when we do our sessions. And finally, very important, we will wrap up with some advice for accompanying persons. There are many administrators, coaches, medical personnel here today, and other athlete personnel in different roles. So we'd like to address your role in the doping control process. So we will attempt to cover all of that in 60 minutes, so wish us luck. But we, of course, will leave some time for your questions and maybe even try to take some of these questions throughout the discussion. So I'll keep an eye on the Q&A throughout the session. So let's kick it off with the hottest topic, the out of comp testing. And for that, I'm going to launch a poll and ask you a quick question here. So you should see something come up on your screen. And the question, if you don't see it yet, is please select the correct statement about out of competition testing. And there are 3 options that you can see on your screen here. An athlete can only be tested within the 1-hour time slot. A 1-hour time slot can be split into increments. An athlete can be tested anywhere, anytime, even outside the 1-hour time slot. And finally, different rules apply to testing inside and outside the 1-hour time slot. So I will give you a couple of seconds to answer that question, to select what you think the correct statement is, and then we'll get into that discussion. So about 40% of you have voted. I'll get over half, and then I will close the poll and share the results with you. So of course, the right answer is the most popular one so far. All right, let's close it up and I'll end the poll. With 70% of you have selected the correct answer, and the correct answer is that the athletes can be tested anywhere, anytime, even outside the 1 hour time slot. A few of you have also selected other options here. Different rules apply to testing inside and outside the 1 hour time slot. Testing is the same. But Jasmina, I think that's a good transition into this conversation about out-of-comp testing. Athletes can be tested outside the 1 hour time slot. Why is this?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to see that over, was it 70% has the correct answer to this, because this is probably one of the most common questions we get as DCOs when we meet the athletes. And I'm trying to keep it short since we only have an hour for all this. But yes, in short, the athletes can be tested anytime, anywhere. And simply the 60-minute or 1 hour slot, as we call it, I often refer it as a missed test slot for the athletes to make it more clear. So it is actually there for the athletes to simplify their lives. If we go back maybe 10 years ago, the athletes had to provide information for pretty much the whole day. And it was complicated. It was complicated for the athletes and it complicated for the DCOs. So I think this 1 hour slot is the missed test slot. It's kind of finding the balance between DCOs being able to find the athletes and the athlete being available for testing, and the athlete not having the burden to be available 24/7. But it doesn't mean that the athlete can only be tested during the 1 hour slot. It's simply a slot where the athlete has to be available for testing. So 1 hour per day, it's not that much. The athlete can be tested outside the slot. Basically, the testing procedures are the same. So the sample collection procedures do not differ whether the test is done inside the slots or outside the slot. But basically, anytime, anywhere, athletes can be tested, but athletes are responsible for being available for that 1 hour per day.
And Taya, you did a lot of out-of-comp testing during your years as a DCO, so you have a lot of experience with this. Does that mean that athletes need to provide their exact place, where they are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when they walk the dog, go to the doctor, go to the grocery store? How does that work for the athletes?
Yeah, so like Jasmina already said, 1 hour is the crucial one where they have to really provide the right address, the right apartment, and they need to make sure that they're there. It helps us DCOs to know where they're training, so where their training facility is or when they're training. And if they're going somewhere for like an extended period, like if you go to vacation and you already know that you're going there, then you put this information down as well. But no, they don't have to do a list of what I'm gonna do every day, a schedule where you write, I'm going to the store, I'm going to the cinema, things like this. But it does help us DCOs to know if they're training somewhere else or yeah, just any major relocations from the primary residence.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the key activities, training,
yes,
long trips, whether it's competition or personal, where you sleep.
So
like that.
the RTP athletes, they do the whole Adams schedule. They have the option to write if they're in competition, where this competition is, or if they're training somewhere, they can write the location of the training, they can write the hours of the training, but they can also just choose 1 hour time slot.
Mm-hmm. So Jasmina, we said we would do case scenarios here. So let's deal with our first case scenario, if we can call it one. An athlete missed a test, and so that would be registered as an unsuccessful attempt. What happens next to the athlete? What do they do?
Okay, so now if the attempt was inside the 1 hour slot, then it is a potential missed test. If it was the test was, or the attempt was done outside the given 1 hour slot, it could be a potential filing failure, depending on if what kind of information came out of the attempt. But in short, as a DCO, we treat it as an unsuccessful attempt. So we report all the information and all the details, what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've noted, where we have been, and all the details, and that is forwarded to the agency then. And for the athlete, then the athlete will have an opportunity to provide explanation why he or she was not available during that designated 1 hour slot when he or she should be available. So the athlete will be contacted by the NADO or the federation, and the information is given to the athlete, and athlete has a certain time to reply and give an explanation. And that is the starting process of it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess to Jasmina's point earlier, submitting whereabouts has become much easier. There's an Athlete Central app now that exists. So if you don't have it and you are an athlete, of course, very good to have it. So if you have put in your training times and you're not at training one day, easy to update that way. Excellent. So there are some questions coming in. I will save them for the end and move on to delays. So delays in the doping control process. So maybe Taya, I'll throw it back to you. What are valid reasons to delay a test? Who decides what a valid reason is?
Yeah, so there are two different types of delays that are accepted. One is in competition and the other one is out of the competition. The one in competition is are easier and are very common. Those would be, for example, participation in a ceremony, or fulfillment of some media commitment, or if you need to compete further. That's not as common one, but it's a valid reason. Then if you need to perform any warm down, if you need to seek some medical attention, or just to find a representative, a translator, or some documentation, because you always need a photo identification with you. So that would be in competition. And then out of competition, normally I would say there are no delays, but the same thing as locating representative, finding a translator, completing the training session, for example, because sometimes we come during the training. Then again, obtaining a photo identification, things like this.
Okay.
So in competition, for example, you normally, if you have paper forms, when you're notified, you would have a form like this. I don't know if you can see it. And you would have all the reasons here. And before the athlete signs here, they can read, they should read everything. So they have all the valid reasons here, and they also get a copy. So they can have this with them if they're not sure of what they can do.
Mm-hmm. And it can be a judgment call at some points, I guess, too, from the doping control officer's side.
Yes, so it's never the athletes who decides, it's never the chaperone who decides. It always goes back to the doping control officer to see if that's a delay that is permittable or not. So any delays always go back to the doping control officer.
Okay. And Jasmina, I guess double question for you. Is there a limit to how much delay can happen? What's your DCO experience over the years? And I guess to follow up on that, is there something that you can do if an athlete says, I have other things to do during the day, I need to go, I had plans that are not, necessary medical attention, but something else? What do you do in that case?
All right. No, we have unlimited time as a DCO, so we can wait all day, all night if needed. I think there is some still kind of like an old rule circulating out there in the anti-doping community that some athletes and coaches still think that the athletes had 1 hour to arrive at the doping control station, and I think it's time now to throw that in the trash can. No. The athletes should arrive at the doping control station immediately after the notification, and then, like Taya gave the delays, acceptable delays, provided that the chaperoning is possible, of course. But when it comes to us waiting and the delay, there is no maximum time on it. But obviously, we all want to get the control done, samples collected, and then go home or wherever we're going, because we have those other things to do. So I think it's in the interest of the athlete as well to come to the doping control station, provide the sample, and just get on with their normal life. No, what comes to I have other things to do. Yes, we all have that. And that's fine. But after the notification, when the athlete has been notified, the athlete has to be chaperoned and escorted all the time. So then it's a kind of finding a compromise how we do that. So if the athlete needs to go and walk the dog, maybe I'll join. Well, maybe we go together and I'll join walking the dog. But if the athlete wants to go for a 40-kilometer bike ride, I'm not sure I can keep up. So then I have to say no to that. So it is up to me as a DCO to decide what we can do. But I find it as a cooperation. So we're working with the athletes to find a solution so that we can give them as much as we can, but we stick to the rules that we have to follow. Mm-hmm. Long answer to a very short question, but yes.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing from your experience, you've walked a dog with an athlete before, if you're using that example.
I have done that. Yes. I said no to the bike rides though, but.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. The things that you've experienced, Taya and Jasmina. Janice, yeah. Janice, I haven't asked you any questions yet, but to this point, I know you haven't necessarily experienced any delays, but your test was at a major event. It was actually before a competition. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the first time that you were tested.
So the first time I was tested, it was my first time. So I didn't have too much information on other than what the DCO told me, but I was lucky that the DCO gave me very clear guidelines on what would happen. And so I felt very comfortable when I was taken in. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I had no problems other than I had to do a partial sample because maybe I was a little bit dehydrated after my weigh-in. But yeah.
And that's, we do have a very strong representation of combat sports today. So I think it's worth talking about this weigh-in question. We'll talk about the partial sample as well, Janice. I'll come back to you on this, but Jasmina, we have a lot of the athletes that may be in a similar position, as unlikely as it sounds, but in a situation where you are maybe at a major games and you're tested technically out of competition, but around the time that you have a weigh-in, luckily for Janice, it was after. What would you recommend to the athletes if they don't want to drink too much water, but they still need to do a doping control? What happens?
Have a lot of time and patience. That's all I can really offer. I mean, I don't think there is any great solution for this one because obviously we don't want the athlete to overhydrate either. And in this case, the athlete definitely doesn't want to hydrate. So I think in this case, the only thing we can do is have a lot of patience, have a lot of time, and just wait until we have a sample. We most likely in these cases we will collect partial sample or partial samples, but slowly but surely we will get to the required volume. So there is really no magic recipe for these kind of scenarios other than patience and time, but because your body does produce urine even if you're not drinking all the time, so it will come.
Makes sense. Kind of a unique circumstance, but could happen. So, and we did get a question about it at one point, Jasmina, if you remember. So interesting that
Right.
it came up. So let's talk about eating, drinking, celebrating, alcohol, medical treatment. So here, Jasmina, I'll ask you again, what can an athlete eat and drink before providing a sample? And I think that's pretty easy answer there, but I'll ask you for the audience.
I mean, as always, it is the athletes, it's the responsibility of the athlete to know what they put inside them, eat and drink, whether it's in conjunction of a doping control or not. But definitely after the notification, so the athletes can eat and drink, but it is their responsibility. So whatever they eat or drink after the notification and before providing the sample, it is at their own risk. So we, as a DCOs, we don't provide any meals or drinks to the athletes, so they can have their own drinks. Yeah, but
and the alcohol. What about alcohol?
Yeah, I think that's probably the hot topic, especially because there was a rule change in January this year in the ISTI. So from now on, alcohol consumption is prohibited at the doping control station and during doping controls. And I understand some athletes. I mean, alcohol, is helps you to pee usually. It leaves you dehydrated, but it probably makes you pee a lot faster. But from a doping control officer point of view, I think this is a good rule change, and I think it's good for the athletes as well. It's not good for the athletes, especially after event, because it will leave you dehydrated. I think it's also good for the kind of the general atmosphere at the doping control station. So for the safety of the fellow athletes and the staff working there. And also it does have an impact, or can have an impact on steroid profile, for example. It can cause changes in the profile. Yeah, let's leave the alcohol after the doping control. And if you really struggle to pee, so try bubble water or Coke. The bubbles usually help you to pee.
Good advice. What about medical treatment, Taya? So twofold question here, and part of this question is not on the screen, but one is, how do you differentiate between what's really necessary in emergency and regular treatment? Does it even make a difference to differentiate? But also the type of treatment, creams, injections, does that, how do you treat it right before doping control?
So of course there's a difference between emergency, for example. I don't know, in fighting sports, you would often have like a broken nose or something like that would happen and would require some medical attention. But it's for emergencies, it's not for the DCO to decide if, for example, you can go to the hospital or not. This should be an on-site doctor that evaluates this. And for other treatments, for example, if you would have to delay your coming to the doping control station for physiotherapy, for example, or something like this, that I as a DCO would allow this, provided you have a chaperone, or if I'm there with you, if you're the only athlete I'm testing. So I think.
And I guess the medical treatments, creams and things like that, does it make any difference? Should you watch what's being applied just because it's doping control, or is it the same process that you would always follow as an athlete?
I mean, I think you need to be aware of, like Jasmina said, what you put in your body and on your body. Any medications, any supplements, anything you take is on you, basically. Mm-hmm. So even if there's a doctor that would put this cream on you, I mean, or recommend this cream, for example, it's by the end of the day, it's on you to make sure that this cream is safe, that it's not on the list of prohibited substances. Anyway, in the end, if this is something that the doctor puts on you and you agree on this with your team. For example, you have the doping control form where you put all the things that you put on your body or all the medications that you took.
Mm-hmm. So it's the same process essentially. Nothing changes. You have to watch what you
should. Exactly. You should be always aware of what you're taking. A lot of times in competition, what I had experienced is people just take other people's drinks, or they put some cream from their colleague and they don't know what they've taken. So they should, I would say, they should really have to be careful about this.
Just a good reminder on strict liability here that we're plugging in for all the athletes in terms of especially around medical treatment and supplements. Okay, let's talk about the partial sample. So it is a common occurrence, I guess, in doping control, partial sample. So very simply, Jasmina, what is a partial sample? What does that mean?
Well, partial sample is a sample where we don't have enough volume. So the 90 milliliters is the minimum required volume to proceed with the sample and seal it. And I mean, 90 milliliters is not a lot, but sometimes it's just impossible to get there. And there are reasons for it. It can be exactly that the athlete is very dehydrated. Sometimes it's just an athlete is nervous and actually there is enough urine, but it just doesn't want to come out right that moment. So in order to get to the 90 milliliters and seal the sample and, everybody being able to go home, this partial sample is like a step-by-step process to get there. So when an athlete provides less than 90 milliliters of urine, so then it will be sealed as a partial sample until the athlete can give more urine. And the idea with this partial sample sealing is that it's a secure. So there are different kind of containers, and there are now, I believe, 4 different equipment out on the market, and each one of them has a slightly different partial sample sealing system. But all of them, the idea is that you seal it in a secure way. It has a sample code that is then matched with the athlete's paperwork, so that we can tell that partial sample belongs to that athlete. And then the athlete can go and do a cool down, or have a little bit of drink, or take a walk, or just sit there with us and wait until he or she can provide more urine. And then more urine is collected and it's added to the already existing urine. So this is important, that the first urine is, I would say, it's the most valuable urine that we always want to preserve. And anything that the athlete provides after is added to it. And they're all mixed together. And that will eventually be the full final sample then. So partial sample is just it's a step to get to the full volume.
Makes sense. Janice, that was the case for you. I thought it was really rare, but we'd spoken and you were, I guess, right after a weigh-in before competition, so you had a partial sample as well. Did the doping control process take you longer? What was that experience?
It did take me a little bit longer. I provided my sample, and since it was my first testing, when they said I had to provide another one, I thought I did something wrong. So I kind of got stressed. But then they explained it, and then I waited maybe 30 to 40 minutes because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to do it again. So I had the feeling or urge to go to the bathroom, but I kind of waited a little bit longer so that I could provide as much as possible. And then I provided my sample and it was okay.
So all went well.
Thankfully.
And to Jasmina's point, I guess it's very important to know that we need to preserve that first sample that was provided. So we actually have a very quick video to show on the final steps of a partial sample collection. So maybe we can see that and then move on to a diluted sample as our next case scenario.
Thank you. See you later. Perfect.
So you had 50, now you have 75, which is more than enough if we combine both together, okay?
Okay.
Perfect, so we're gonna check that this is the sample you provided at the beginning. So check the number again, here and here. Okay, so as check if it was opened or damaged while you were away. If it's still sealed, please cut it open with your scissors. And make sure you don't spill this one, so maybe put it a little bit on the side. Perfect. So open it. Perfect. This you can throw away. Okay, now very important, I'm gonna have you select a new cup. Very good. And now you're gonna pour this one first and then this one on top in the new cup. Okay, so you can open it. Okay, so open this. Take everything out now. Very good. Okay, take the top off. So take the red circle off and the plastic cap. Perfect. You can throw both away. Good, so pour this one in the new cup. Right, and then top it off with this one. So make sure it's sealed properly. Take the little plastic off and then just pour everything in the new cup.
Okay.
Well done. So this one you can throw away. So put the lid back on top. Great. Can I just see the total volume? So 125. Perfect.
So nice and simple. You can see the process here. If it's ever the case for you or your athlete that there's a partial sample, there's not too much modification. I guess the key is patience and to know that simply the original sample is kept and topped off. So pretty straightforward there. We can take a look now at the diluted sample, and that's basically athletes who are overhydrated, had too much water, and basically what comes out is water. So we can talk about this case scenario as well. So maybe Taya, very simple explanation of what specific gravity means in this context.
Yes, so specific gravity is basically the concentration or the density of the urine. I don't know if you notice, for example, in the morning when you go pee, your pee is more yellow and it's more concentrated, as in when you have some alcohol, it's more watery and has no color. And that means that the specific gravity is very low. What the DCOs use is a refractometer. It can be either digital or analog one. And we use a little pipette and use a little drop of urine to see where the specific gravity is. And if it's very watery or the concentration is very low, this means that it's a diluted sample. We do the normal procedure. We pack the urine as in any normal procedure, but then we have to gather another sample and another one. It depends until we get to the specific gravity that it makes the sample valid. And this is for example, if you have a 90 milliliter, yeah, you have it on the slide, I can see. So 90 milliliters, for example, it's 1.005. Anything below, you can already see in the color that it's like something like you would squeeze a lemon in.
Yeah.
But don't be tricked with the color, because sometimes if you're taking lots of vitamins or eat some sort of foods, the color can be very yellowish or sometimes red, and this doesn't mean the specific gravity is going to be okay. So that's why we use the refractometer.
And I guess specific gravity is a really maybe sounds like a complicated term, but it's basically a way to describe the concentration, and that's the most important part for athletes to know, is that if you are, especially from an endurance sport, that you competed in an event like a marathon or 50K walk, or if you're a cross-country skier, then filling up on water may make the process much longer for you. And Jasmina, I think you have a record. Are you allowed to share your record?
Oh, this is a long time ago. So the oldest, 18 samples. So it was 22 hours. It's not a standard day for the athlete or for the DCOs, but these happen. But I think in general, during the last, I would say 10 years, I think we've seen a decrease in the number of additional samples collected because of they're diluted. I think there's a lot of education going out to the athletes. The athletes understand better, because in the past, when they saw a doping control officer, the first reaction was to grab a 5-liter water bottle and start drinking like crazy. And that's the reaction, because you think that the more you drink, the faster you urinate. And yes, maybe, but we also want to have a proper sample. So I think the number of additional samples in general have decreased, and athletes are a lot more aware of it. And then they already know when we come that, okay, I need to go easy on the drinking if I want to get rid of you guys fast.
Makes sense. It's kind of counterintuitive almost for some athletes.
Yeah.
But this part of the process is actually really, really straightforward. For those of you that haven't been tested before, we have a very short clip to show you, 40 seconds, how specific gravity is measured. So we can just take a look at that and then move on to our next case scenario.
We're going to check the specific gravity now. So if you can just remove the lid from the collection vessel. Perfect. So 1.017. Okay, so your sample is okay.
And that's it. So very straightforward here. Now you know the terms partial and diluted sample. I think what's really key now is that we spend some time on the doping control form. So before we go to the next slide, I'm actually going to throw another poll question your way that you should see on your screen in a second. And so I'll ask you here to select one statement that you think is correct. This is a very important document, of course. And so we'll talk about a few common questions around it. And while you are selecting your right answer, I will just read it out for those of you perhaps that do not see the question. So the correct statement about the doping control form, DCF for short, is 1, it's a legally binding document. 2, the laboratory receives the doping control form with full athlete information, including name, sport, and country. 3, it is the doping control officer's responsibility to make sure that the doping control form is filled out correctly. And 4, the negative comments that I write on the DCF, on the form, will have an effect on my test results. So 4 options there for you to select from. You can choose one that you think is the most accurate, the correct statements. And actually we have a tie right now between two answers. Between the doping control form being a legally binding document and the DCO's responsibility to make sure that it's completed accurately. So I'm at about 50%. Let's give it a couple more seconds and then I will share the results with you. Actually, then maybe I can throw it over to Janice with the question, but I'll wrap up the poll first. So we're at about 60%. Let me just reach that 60 and I'll close and share with you. Here we go. So very important that we're talking about this document because the most popular answer is not 100% true. So yes, of course, it is the doping control officer's responsibility to make sure that the form is correct, but it is equally the athlete's responsibility to make sure that it is correct as well, because it is a legally binding document. So the first statement is correct here. Once your signature is on it as an athlete, it becomes this legally binding document. So you need to check that the information is correct. So thank you for participating in the poll. Let me close it out here. And Janice, we talked about this doping control form and you didn't know much about the doping control process when you were tested for the first time and you were taking supplements. So when you were filling out that form, what did you put? How specific were you? What did you list? Was it brand names? Was it just a type of supplement? How did you fill that part out?
So when I was reading the form, I wrote down all the supplements that I was taking. So I was taking multivitamins, magnesium, vitamin C, and protein. But the thought did cross my mind. Like I made sure that my choices were quality products, but always there's the chance that the products could have some contamination. So that thought and that stress did cross my mind when I was filling out the form. And it kind of, it's because I had gone to school to kind of elevate my game and to use natural products, but even so, you still have that that risk even when taking supplements. So yeah.
And that's, I think, the scariest part. The biggest question is always around that field that says, please list the medications and supplements. So maybe Jasmina, what do the athletes need to write? Do they need to write brand names? Do they need to write their coffee intake? What is it that they list on that form?
Yeah, this is a question that we often get. What should I write? Should I write this? And as a, I mean, as a doping control officer, I shouldn't be the one telling you what to write or what not to write. But my how to say, my guide to everybody, all the athletes, is that write as much as possible, as detailed as possible. And one good idea is to have, every time you take a vitamin or medication, and so take a photo of it and save it on your phone. So because normally we have our cell phones with us all the time. So then you have all the details. You have the brand name and you have the dose, and then you just put the time or the date you took it last time and what the dosage was and so on. The more details, the better, I think.
And it is for the athlete's protection as well to write all of that. We put that strong statement out there for a reason. The correct statement in the poll is that it is a legally binding document. So the more information you provide, the better. So we focused a lot on the medications and supplements side of things. We can actually watch this quick video because there is a lot of other questions that the doping control officer asks the athletes. So we can talk about these after we watch the video.
Great. So let's just check the number again. Okay. So the next step is medication supplements for the last 7 days. If you have any, please state them here. Do you have a therapeutic use exemption? No?
No.
Okay, so we'll press no here. Okay, just make a line here for the rest of the box so nobody can add anything. This is if you accept or not to put your sample into further anonymous research. So it's for laboratory research. You can either say yes or no. It's totally independent of your testing for doping for this sample.
Okay, so I accept.
Okay, do you have any comments in general about the procedure, about the
Everything was
notification?
okay.
Perfect, I'm glad to hear. So a line for the rest. Okay, so let me just go back to the form. So you had no representative, so just cross out this box. 26. So final time. Okay, check the form again. So we already did the notification part. Obviously, the most important part is the number. So I'm going to ask you to check it again. Okay, your medication, supplements. Okay, so no comments as you said. And then just read this box here, please. And one final signature here. Okay. Perfect. Let me just give you a copy of the form. Here you go. Thank you very much.
And here you go, a quick demo there for you. One part that I want to focus on, Taya, with you is the checking and the rechecking of the numbers. And one of the poll questions was, or the statements in the poll question was that the lab will see my name, nationality, my sports. And is that the case, Taya? And then why are the numbers so important?
No, so the laboratory is not going to see your name. What they see is just the sport and the code. That's why the code is so important. It is linked to your name, but the laboratory cannot see this. So I have here one form, for example, this is a blood collection form, and you see all this empty space that you have to fill out. But this is the, for example, what laboratory gets. So basically just your code, the sport up here, and then here the medication, medication part. Now every bottle has a unique number, and this is going to be assigned to you. This is when you have a test and you can see that you have different bottles, and every bottle has a different number with the barcode. And in the end, this number is going to be assigned to your sample. So what the laboratory gets is just this number. So there should be no way that those two can be linked.
Makes sense. Exactly. So that's the key thing to know is that the number is your unique identifier. So very important to double, triple, quadruple check that in your form as many times as you need to. Maybe we can also see the next slide with some of the other questions. Jasmina, we talked about this paper form, and now there's a digital form as well. And what's the story with therapeutic use exemptions? Do you need to carry all your documentation? Do you need to indicate that on the form? How does that work?
Well, you don't have to carry all your documentation with you. Sometimes it's a whole binder of documents that you would have to carry around you. No, but if you have a TUE, it's good to you need to declare that substance that you're taking and that you have a TUE for. So you need to declare it in the medication, definitely. If you have for example, a lot of athletes take a photo of their the certificate they have, and it has a certain number, which is, it's a unique number. So you can put that unique number on the doping control form on the medications part. But if you want to give the copy, if you have a copy and you feel safer and better that you give a copy to the doping control officer, please do that. It's okay. You don't have to do that, but you can do that. And the doping control officer will just file that with the paperwork. But it's important that you do declare the substance that you have a TUE for on the form.
And now there's a lot of tablet forms, so digital forms, correct?
Yes.
So it looks a bit different sometimes, of course, than the paper form, but also as it relates to the comments, in the paper form, a doping control officer would see the comments that the athlete provides, whereas now, once an athlete submits the comments on the digital version, the doping control officer sees nothing. And why is that important?
I have to say that there are several versions, like we have different type of material out there. There are several versions of the digital doping control form, and all of them follow the normal paper form. So all the same information is there, but it's put in a different way there. And at least the ones that I've been working with, the great thing is that when it comes to comments, number one, there's a lot more space to write in, because the paper form is a very small comment box. So now the athlete, the DCO, whether it's the chaperone or the representative, they have a lot of space, unlimited space almost, to write comments on it. So that's the one thing. But also in the systems that I've worked with the tablet, so the athlete can write comments there and close it, and the DCO and give it the tablet back to the DCO, and the DCO doesn't see them. I mean, it is not for the DCO to read the athlete's comments there either. Those are the athlete's comments, but I think this is great for the athletes. I think it will make them feel more comfortable to provide the comments there, because that's really important that the athlete or if there's a coach present, that they write the comments. If they feel that something was not done correctly and somewhere the rules were not followed, it's important that they write that on the doping control form.
Exactly. Back to the legally binding idea of the document to protect yourself, to write all the comments there. Yeah. Last question for you, Tai, on the doping control form. What is this research consent? Are they going to find something in the research that they wouldn't have found in the regular test of the sample?
Actually, I get this question a lot. With more like athletes asking me, what should I write here? Should I give my consent or not? I mean, it's not for me to decide what you do. I just always try to explain that basically giving consent does not mean that you are giving consent to the doping control procedure, because sometimes there's a misconception. If they say no, they will not research my sample, which is not true. This is just an extra question asking athletes if they want to give their urine to be further analyzed for doping control purposes. This urine should not be, or this analysis is not then connected to the athlete. Urine is not connected to the athlete then, but it's just for on volunteer basis. Mm-hmm. And I know some federations are strictly against it and tell their athletes to check no for the consent part. The others are saying, no, I have no issues. But anyways, I think those two things are separated. So you give your urine for the doping control, and then the consent form is just for supplementary analysis that laboratories might do on doping control, but it has nothing to do with the doping control.
Exactly. So two separate things which often get mixed up. They're completely separate, no connection between your results and the consent for research. But certainly helpful, I guess, to have more samples being researched for the lab. So I'm sure they appreciate the positive response from some of the athletes.
Yes, I think we're trying to explain very well, and since we've been explaining a little bit more, I think we've been getting more and more checks on that department.
And I was also saying that, I don't know about you, Janice, but when I was tested, I don't remember what I answered, but I feel like I would have said no because I don't know what it means. And I just had this fear of, okay, if I have this option to say no, I'll say no. I don't know if you remember checking off that part, Janice, or not.
I don't remember checking off. I don't know what I checked off, but yeah, I guess the thought, like how everybody said, the thought of, it being used against you somehow, or that is often something that pops up in your head, I guess.
Yeah, that's an important point too. When you start to list your medications and supplements or comments you think that may be used against me, where in fact it's the opposite. It's to protect the athlete, to make sure that you capture as much information as possible in the document. So, that helps. If there's some abnormalities, they can perhaps be explained by some of the comments or some of the medications listed. Okay, so we are doing well on time. We have 2 key topics, and I see a lot of questions coming in, so we'll get to those momentarily. But very important to talk about blood sample collection, some very common questions, misconceptions there, and then we'll finish off with the accompanying personnel. So I guess the general question for Jasmina is, what's the difference between a urine and a blood sample? Why are those 2 being collected?
For the athlete, I think there's a big difference. Some of them prefer definitely, can you only take blood? or the other is like, please, no blood, only urine. So this is really 50-50 out on the athlete side. But blood and urine are different because you can do different kind of analyses on blood that you cannot maybe do on urine, and sometimes the other one, analysis on urine is more blood is more precise than on a urine. So it's simply a different type of analysis done on it. So it doesn't have to, as an athlete, you should not think that if they do blood on me, I'm suspicious or something. No, it has nothing to do with that. Nowadays, usually the blood and the urine go hand in hand. So they're always collected at the same time, and they kind of complement each other. Sometimes it can be only blood, and sometimes only urine, but usually they go together and they complement each other.
And the big misconception is that, so much blood is being taken, I can't train, I can't perform. So Taya, can athletes train after providing a blood sample? Or when you are showing up to a training venue, what do you recommend when you notify an athlete?
Yes, so we're not taking that much blood, even though they call us the vampires when we come. I've heard that a lot of times. For example, if you see the violet and the yellow tubes there, one holds 3 milliliters, one holds 5 milliliters. So if you gather all of those together, so in 4 tubes, that's actually like 1 spoon of blood. So I think that's not too much to give. I know some athletes don't feel good with the needle, or are not comfortable with seeing blood. So we take extra precautions with those athletes, and we take care of them and make sure that they don't faint or anything like this, even though it might happen. But normally they can train after. I've never heard of a case where there would be like some sort of damage to the arm where they couldn't train or compete. But yeah, when we come to the training, for example, we try to get blood first. I know we're going to talk about this later with the waiting time after, but we try to get the blood first, and then not to wait after the training.
And we can talk about the waiting time as well.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my follow-up question as well. The 10 minutes, 2 hours, what are these things, and what does that mean?
So we ask the athletes to sit for 10 minutes before taking the blood. That's just to stabilize everything for them, for the blood pressure to go back to normal. It's like when you go to the doctor's office, they would also say the same thing. So they have to wait for 10 minutes before we take the blood. And normally, like I said, we try to get the blood before the training, because after any physical activity, the parameters are a little bit off. So if you're doing blood passport, which means that you're following blood in different times through time, then we're trying to get the same environment when you take blood, the same conditions, for example, always to take blood.
And so that's a different amount of tubes as well. Going back to Jasmina's comment that, if more tubes are being collected, or if blood and urine is being collected, it's not because an athlete is suspicious. It's just different tests, right? So different amount of tubes. I guess that's another question that we often receive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the amount of tubes, sometimes, we come with 5 tubes and you can see the athletes panicking there. But like Taya said, we're collecting like a couple of teaspoons of urine in total. And the number of tubes or the color of tubes, it doesn't indicate anything about the suspicions of the athlete or anything else. It's simply a different type of analysis on the blood. So, I mean, it can be one tube and used for the athlete biological passport, which has these requirements of 10 minutes seated, feet on the floor, and 2 hours after the activity, because it's not a doping test as such, where you can get a positive result of it or a negative result. It's basically like a monitoring and a passport where you collect a lot of samples. So that's one. And then sometimes you can collect two tubes, sometimes 5 tubes. But they are simply for different type of analysis. So nothing to do with any suspicion of an athlete or an athlete.
And we've been
Just like to-
receiving some.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add, sometimes especially with the athletes that haven't done the tests much, or it's their first time, when they see 5 tubes, they think we're going to insert the needle 5 times. I just wanted to make sure that it's only one time the needle goes in and then the tubes get changed.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a fear if you're scared of needles. It's not
Yes.
like the best news to see all the tubes. But we've actually been receiving a lot of questions on Athlete Biological Passport. So if that's a topic that is of interest, let us know in the survey after the webinar, because it seems like that's another topic of discussion where we could provide some information to you. Obviously, we won't touch on it in too much detail today for the purpose of staying on track with the topic. So let us know if you want to hear more about the Athlete Biological Passport. Okay, so let's wrap up with the last point of discussion, and that's athlete support personnel. There's many of you who, as I just said earlier, who are athlete support personnel. So I guess I will start with a question from the athlete perspective. So Janice, over to you. Your coach was with you at the doping control station when you were tested. So what would you say would be your advice as an athlete? What role should the accompanying person play? What is it that you need from the athlete perspective?
Well, with respect to the athlete support personnel, the person who's accompanying them, I think it would be nice if that person had some sort of role in educating the athlete prior, so that they're familiar with the process, because it's their job to support the athlete and to make them feel as comfortable as they can during the doping control process. So as a coach, it's their job and responsibility to know as much, if not a little bit more, than the athletes, because they're the one guiding them, especially the youth as well, with respect to diet, medication, and if they don't have enough information in those areas, it's their role and responsibility to guide them to someone who has greater experience and knowledge in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Jasmina, you've had a lot of experience with accompanying persons. So any advice from the field for those listening in?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen good, and I see the bad ones as well. So, but in general, I would like to say to the athletes, coaches, managers, whoever the representative support personnel is, that I would like to emphasize the word support. They should be there to support the athlete through the doping control process and do it in a positive way, because it should be a positive experience, really. I mean, it's it shouldn't be a negative experience. But unfortunately, often we see the athlete coming in and being cooperative and okay, but then the representative has a very negative attitude, and it changes and it complicates the process for the athlete and for the doping control officer as well. So for the athlete, I would say, it is your responsibility. It's your sample. So be on top of things, know what you're doing, know what, we should be doing. So know that. Have a person with you who is supporting you through it and not obstructing, because then things will get complicated. So I think the word support here is important.
Yeah, definitely. Taya, is there anything that you would add from your perspective?
No, I think, Jasmina and Janice said it all, and maybe just that really it would help me as a DCO if the support would be educated in ways on how to support, even if it's just running off to get the identification for the athlete, or maybe the team doctor having all the medication listed that athlete took, so they're supporting them in that way. But just knowing that exactly they're there for their support, and at the end of the day, it's going to be the athlete who needs to provide the sample, and it's not their role is not to obstruct but feel free to ask as many questions as you need. The doping control officer will try to help to help out with those. But
yeah, and I guess the key is any question that you can answer in ahead, which means getting informed on the process, knowing things like the ones that we discussed today around partial sample, diluted sample, the things that you can find out prior to doping control, and then be the source of information for the athlete. That is key. And if you actually have questions during the doping control process that you're concerned, if it's a valid question, then by all means ask those questions.
Yes, for example, sometimes what I get from coaches is, or they make this mistake and they ask especially with the younger athletes or the younger coaches, they would say to the athlete, you have doping control, now you have to drink. So then we end up with a case of a diluted sample, for example, and that prolongs everything. So maybe just to get educated on that front of like what they can do, what they can eat or drink, or it's like this, very practical things, I think.
But on a positive note, I think there also has been a shift in a change in the mentality with the athlete support personnel during the years. I think it's definitely getting better, and I think also the coaches and managers are more knowledgeable. They understand the processes and they understand what is being done there. So I mean, I think there is definitely a change, and it's going to the better direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess the one final point that's important to make is around the rights and responsibilities in terms of comments, which is the last bullet point there that you see. Jasmina, you've added that when we spoke yesterday. I think it's important that we share your feedback with the audience.
Yeah, definitely. Just like we discussed the comment section on the for the athlete, the athlete should write comments on if they're not satisfied with some part of the process, that if they think some part of the process was not done correctly. The same way with the athlete representative, they have a place there to write their comments. If they were not satisfied with some part of the process, they should definitely write comments on it. Mm-hmm. If it's regarding why I was selected again, that's something that they should maybe address with the federation again, because that has nothing really to do with the doping control process. But definitely, if there's something that was done incorrectly, also the athlete support personnel they have a place there on the comment section.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all very helpful and good feedback. I hope that it was helpful for those of you listening in. This is the main part now of our webinar, that we've gotten through all the content. So we have a couple of minutes left for your questions. I see a few of them in the Q&A. Just a quick reminder, if you're typing questions in the chat, we may not see them because there is just a lot of comments coming in, but in the Q&A, we can see them. You can upvote other people's questions. So if you want to go in there and check out what's being asked, feel free. Just from some of the housekeeping questions. So our social media and the Facebook page to follow the ITA will show it on the last slide. So you'll be able to see that for Brad's question. Then I can see a question about the ISTI, so the standard for testing and investigations, and I'll read it out. Maybe I'll hand it over to Jasmina. With the revised, oh, where did it go? Answered. Maybe you put it in answered already. The question disappeared for me. I started reading with the revised ISTI, but then it left. Oh, here you go. I found it. With the revised ISTI, when the volume of urine is 150 milliliters and the USG is lower, do we encourage the athlete to try to produce as much as 150 milliliters from the start? Jasmina, does that make sense for you, the question?
Sorry, I'm visual. I need to see the question, but so if you can repeat it. If we have 150 milliliters of urine.
So the question is, with the revised ISTI, where you can provide up to 150 milliliters of urine, and I guess that's a DCO perspective question, not an athlete question. Do we then encourage the athlete to produce more urine from the start?
Oh, so I guess we're referring to the specific gravity. So if you have 150 milliliters or more, the specific gravity can be a little bit lower. I mean, the key here is that the athlete should empty the bladder. So the athlete provides whatever urine they have. If they have, I believe most of the cups fit 160, 170 milliliters of urine. So the athlete should fill the cup. And if the athlete still has urine in the bladder, they need to empty the bladder. So whether it's 160 milliliters or 140 milliliters, whatever the athlete has in the bladder needs to go in the cup. And then from there, we proceed with the specific gravity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question, and I don't know, Jasmina, if you have an answer to that, or Taya. If you come across a transgender athlete, any specific pointers to take note? Is there a difference in the testing process there? Would you know? Or should we take that question back to our testing team?
Yes, I think I'm not comfortable answering that because there has been a lot of discussions on that, and at least the rules and the instructions have not come to me, as I have not been in a situation. So I think it would be better if somebody else with more knowledge would answer that.
And we'll take that, Gobi, we'll take it back to our testing team to give you the right instructions, because as Jasmina said, I think it's a fairly recent topic as well. So we want to make sure that we provide the right answer. Send us an email, we're already in touch, so we'll make sure that we get back to you on this question. A question from Minwoo: is the picture of ID card or passport in the athlete's phone? So if they show it on their phone as an ID, not the physical ID, is that valid?
Yes, I would say yes. I mean, obviously, we always try to get the main thing is that we can identify the athlete, and there needs to be some kind of photo identification of the athlete. And if the athlete can provide their passport, a driving license, or whatever national ID card with the photo, but now we know that many countries have electronic ID cards as well. So we need to start accepting those as well as we can make sure that it is official ID card. But yes, in the cases where we're in a place where athlete doesn't have, who carries a passport with them, or sometimes not even driving license. So we can accept a photo of the passport or any other photo ID. This obviously would be then reported on a DCO report, but yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. A question from Azani, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. What happens if the athlete missed the test during the 60-minute time slot? So I remember this question came in the beginning. As a DCO, so I guess that's a DCO question, do we need to follow up then to test in the 60-minute slot on the same day?
No, I don't think you can do that, because if the athlete has been attempted inside, there was only one 60-minute slot per day. Mm-hmm. So if the DCO attempts the athlete inside that 60-minute slot, then we've lost that slot already. So the athlete has lost the slot for the day, and a DCO has lost the slot. For the athlete, athlete will be contacted by the agency to provide explanation why he or she was not available. For the DCO, then again, DCO would immediately report it to the agency, and they would give additional information whether to, when to attempt again. But there's only one 60-minute slot per day.
Yeah, makes sense. A question from Tudor, either from Taya or Jasmina, whoever wants to provide feedback. And I'm not sure if you've had this experience. How do you deal with athletes aware of the procedure who are not willing to read the rights and responsibilities on the form?
Well, that's very common, Taya, isn't it? Athletes who get tested thousands of times, they know them, but they should know them. Do you want to take it, Taya, or?
I mean, as they are aware of the procedure and everything, I mean, every time we tell them, please read the instructions, like our procedure as a DCO is always the same, should be always the same. and they should read it. I know some of them don't, they just sign, but this is on them then. They were provided an option where they were able to read all the instructions, all the responsibilities. If they don't do it and they sign the document and then something is wrong, I mean, like we said, it's a legally binding document. So
and here, I think the responsibility also, it is the athlete's responsibility to follow the procedures, as well as it is the DCO's responsibility to make the athlete and aware and confirm that the athlete understands what the procedures are. So I think here it goes, we always have to meet somewhere in between, but this is very common that the athletes don't want to take the time, the few minutes to kind of listen to us and read them. And it's very important. And sometimes it may be a language barrier, so the athlete doesn't really understand. And here, I think it's important that then we find a translator or somebody who can explain that to the athlete, because it is, if the athlete understands the rights and responsibilities from the start, I think the whole testing process will be smoother, and we avoid all the problems later at the end where the athlete says, well, I didn't know this, and so on. So, but as from the DCO perspective, we can only do our job. We need to show them, we need to maybe, voice them and confirm with the athlete that, have you understood? And then in the end, the athlete signs it, and by
yes,
signing
I think this question is really important. It's very fast. Did you understand?
Yeah.
Do you need any help with this?
Yeah.
Can I make it any clearer? I mean, it only takes a few seconds to ask this, and sometimes you see that they don't understand. But for athletes that have dealt with this procedure, it's normally very fast. We do, as DCOs, take a bit more time with people that we don't know, or we ask them, have you ever done this test before?
Mm-hmm.
And we go a little bit slower and more into detail in explaining. So I think, yeah.
And for athletes on the session, I know the questions are coming from both perspectives, the athlete support personnel, but also there are a few doping control officers on, or NADA representatives online now listening to us. So from the athlete perspective, ask if you do not understand, ask about the rights and responsibilities as well, or make sure that, especially in the major event environment or major big international events, that you get language assistance to make sure that you understand. We have a couple more minutes, so maybe I'll tackle a few questions. I know we won't get through all of them, but I keep going down the list here. A question from Michelle. There's a lot of debate about who writes the medication listing on the form. Who do you advise should write on the form when it comes to the section regarding medication?
I don't think it matters. Now we have paper forms and we have electronic doping control forms. So it doesn't really matter. I always prefer personally that the athlete does it, because then we get it correct. But if the athlete, for example, is not able to write it, or we have a wrong keyboard on the tablet, then the athlete can, for example, write them on a paper and then I just copy them. But I think, answer to your question, it does not really matter as long as they are the medication and supplements are declared. And remember that the athlete has to check it. So if it's the doping control officer who writes it, or if it's the coach with the permission of the athlete who writes the declaration, the athlete has to check the form because the athlete signs it.
And I guess the key point here is, if you as an athlete do not know your medications and supplements, that's a big red flag. So beyond who writes it, you as an athlete should be fully aware of what you're taking. So if you are in fact checking with your coach because you're not sure, not for any other reason, not because of a preference to write or not to write, make sure that you are fully aware of what is going into your system. Okay, let's try one more here. And I guess that's a technical question. The partial sample is kept in bottle B or in bottle A. Where is it kept?
This is eternal question. Is eternal question. I think we're talking about the Berlinger partial sample kit, because we have four different equipment out on the market, and they all have slightly different partial samples. Short answer to that question that always comes up: it does not matter. It doesn't matter. I prefer, sticking to the rule that it goes in a B bottle, because then it kind of makes sense with the sample collection when we pour the urine, because then you start with the B bottle. So to be kind of following that procedure, I would pour it in a B bottle. But if the athletes see that, sometimes the DCO asks to pour it in an A bottle first, and seal it in an A bottle, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter.
I'll throw in one question, because I think it's really important that we address this one, and then everyone else, we can actually put right away our email address on the screen. So if those of you who we didn't address the questions from, please email us. We do receive a few questions after each session. We may take a little longer, but we do get back to you on your questions. But this one I will address in the last 2 minutes. Maybe if you have, Jasmina or Taya, a very quick answer. A question from Charles: what happens if the DCO has a targeted athlete in competition and realizes the athlete is not on the team that day? Do you abort the mission?
If it's an in-competition testing, the athlete is
not on the team, let's
target. I think I think this is difficult to answer in a general way, Taya. I think that because every competition, every mission has specific instructions and rules. Mm-hmm. So if this happens, then do this. If this happens, do this. So I'm not able to give a general answer to that, because I believe that it is very mission and event specific. Taya?
I mean, like you said, I guess it depends on the sport and how the teams are made. And sometimes in some sports, that person would not even be in the venue. Mm-hmm. If I know that the person is, again, it depends on the instructions, but if the person is on the venue, but is just not competing that day, then maybe we would still test them. But if they're nowhere to be found, and then you don't even notify them. So
makes sense. So it's a bit a bit more complicated to answer than I thought. So Charles and everyone else, please email us if you have a specific scenario. We'll touch base with our testing team and make sure that we get you the right answer to your questions. So at this point, I think we can wrap up and finish this webinar. I just want to say thank you to Jasmina, to Taya, to Janice for the time that you've taken to be with us, to the audience for really your attention over an hour and a half. It's a long session, but you've been engaged, you answered our questions, you asked your questions. So thank you very much for this. We will send you, a few of you have asked, a copy of the slides, so you will receive them by email along with the survey. Please, we ask you to fill out the survey. It's very important for us, good or bad feedback, to make sure that we are, in fact, delivering sessions that are of value to you and are interesting and are useful. And we will be online again on March 23rd for our webinar number 3. We will confirm the topic shortly, and it's going to be same time, same place. We're going to be on Zoom. We will share it on our social media channels that you can see on your screen. And that wraps up the session for today. So thank you very much once again to everyone, to the panelists, to the experts. We wish you a good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world. And thank you once again for joining. See you later.